Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. 5 days after militant organization Hamas mounted an attack on Israel, Ministry of External Affairs yesterday in the evening came out with an official statement on the war for the first time. MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said, and I will quote exactly what he said that there is a universal obligation to observe international humanitarian law. Apart from this, he reiterated India's position on Palestine and Israel conflict, where he said that there is a need to call for a direct negotiation towards an independent, sovereign, and viable state of Palestine living with secure and recognized borders side by side at peace with Israel. Now, this statement was in a complete variance with what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in his post on X, which was formerly called Twitter, and he unilaterally lent support to Israel without making a mention on Palestine. So the question we are asking is that, does this look like a dramatic shift in India's stance on the Israel and Palestine issue? Why did Prime Minister Narendra Modi overlook this important aspect? And was Ministry of External Affairs confused and silent because of Prime Minister's post? Joining me now is a special panel. Joining us is Professor Aftab Kamal Pasha, who's international affairs expert from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you so much, Professor Pasha, for joining. We have Ambassador Veena Sikri with us. Thank you, ma'am, so much for joining. And we have international affairs expert Sanjay Kapoor with us. Thank you so much, Sanjay. And I'll begin the conversation with Professor Pasha today. Professor Pasha, do you see this as a dramatic shift in India's stance towards Palestine and Israel issue, given the fact that what Prime Minister posted on Twitter and what MEA said yesterday? Do you think that MEA got confused and it was deliberately silent because of Prime Minister's post?
Well, the Prime Minister spoke from his heart what he feels towards his close friend for more than 3 decades, Benjamin Netanyahu, when both spoke about the issue. He was horrified about the huge casualties Israelis have taken. So that perhaps moved Prime Minister to issue that kind of a swift statement. But then the foreign minister did not utter a word for almost 6.5 days. And this was quite revealing to them, and it shows the undercurrent of the way Prime Minister runs the show, and that is all by himself. But later on, his election mood and all the rhetoric which flows in terms of BJP's narrative on communalism, on minorities, on vote gatherings, so on and so forth. So the MEA has immediately intervened after 6 days to do the damage control because they have to implement the policies and the strategic partnerships which the Prime Minister does through hugging. And these diplomats work day in and day out to establish close relations and implement the declarations and statements which the Prime Minister signs. So in that way, it shows the undercurrent of how Prime Minister would like to ride roughshod over structures, well-established structures, and time-tested policies which the MEA has been articulating for the last several decades.
Professor Pasha, it wouldn't be wrong if I say that Prime Minister's stance and MEA's stance is totally at variance in what we have seen over the last 6-7 days?
Of course, what Prime Minister said was a complete at variance from the balanced position which he himself has advocated in several joint communiques, official visits, and at the international forums. He seemed to be quite oblivious of what he has taken the position on the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I think MEA had to quietly remind him of the enormous price we may have to pay if the OIC gangs up because of his statement on Kashmir. It will be a problem apart from Turkey and Pakistan and one or two. If the 56 countries line up, it will be a problem.
But wasn't this a deliberate statement made by Prime Minister? To imagine that Prime Minister was completely oblivious of the fallout, one wouldn't think that way. So was this a deliberately made statement because of some domestic electoral compulsions? Did he do this?
Yes, of course. He is in an election mood. He has been canvassing day in and day out in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and he is hell bent on taking these two states where the Congress is a very strong rival. So, in that way, he has fixed eyes on the supporters of BJP and RSS and Hindutva. He doesn't want to lose the 5 to 8% swing voters among the Hindus, particularly, who would vote because of his statement on Israel and Hamas and how it will help RSS to mobilize. That he is a strong leader. He is a global leader who will not mince his words as far as extremism is concerned, both domestically and internationally. So, in that way, you must look at it as election mood
Right.
in which the Prime Minister has landed himself during this situation.
All right. Now, let me come to Ambassador Veena Sikri, and I think she would be able to explain to us that why this variance in the statements coming out from Prime Minister and, of course, the MEA. Ma'am, can you really explain why this divergence of views? I mean, Prime Minister seems to be in one direction and MEA seems to be in one direction.
No, look, let me be very clear. There is no divergence of views. India's strong stand against terrorism does not in any way conflict with India's equally strong stand in support of the people of Palestine, in favor of a just, secure, viable country of Palestine for the Palestinians and for the two-state formula. So I think there is no conflict. We should not try and create a conflict where none exists. I think it's entirely wrong. I don't agree with that at all. I think the Prime Minister's statement, as we know, was motivated very strongly by the terrible, bestially cruel attack by the Hamas on Israel, by the people of the photographs of babies whose heads have been sundered apart and women who've been killed. People have been taken hostages. In a public concert, paragliders land and kill about 260 people. Though that is a terrorist attack. And terrorism, there is no such thing as good terrorism or bad terrorism or root cause terrorism. It has to be condemned. India is a strong proponent of a UN convention, a comprehensive UN convention against terrorism. And we've been supporting this for years. So this position against terrorism is completely true. And you will see that the world today is talking about this as a Hamas-Israel issue. Nobody even in any way contradicting or taking anything away from the Palestinians' right to have their own secure country for the Palestinians. So
Ambassador Sikri, first post which Prime Minister put out was understandable because by that time Israel had not begun with its counter-offensive and the airstrikes. But even when Israel began its counter-attacks, after Prime Minister Modi only gave a unilateral support to Israel, he didn't mention a word about Palestine. And that's where the problem is. That condemning Hamas, but also he should have condemned Netanyahu.
No, look, I am not going to get into why the Prime Minister could condemn Netanyahu. I mean, what is happening now, for example, if there are civilians in the Gaza Strip moving south, the UN is saying something on that. Other people are saying something on that. I don't see why you are suggesting that the Prime Minister should condemn the leader of another country. I don't think that's absolutely the way India conducts its diplomacy. So I don't think that's in the picture at all. What is important is, number one, India's position against terrorism, and number two, India's complete support for the two-state solution, for the support for the people of Palestine, and that they must have a just, secure, exactly what MEA has said in his statement. And I think MEA's statement coming out so strongly is very good, because they're two legs of the same issue. And even to secure, the just state of Palestine for the Palestinians, you cannot get it through terrorism. I think that is the point to recognize. Again, I come back to the issue. Why is the world calling this as a Hamas-Israel? Because it's a terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel. And that is what being condemned universally. Nobody is against, at least I think we are strongly in favor of the Palestinians. And I think many other countries are equally strongly in favor of the Palestinians. And that's come out very strongly in the MEA statement. So I don't think that this kind of a so-called division or whatever variance, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this position of saying MEA is against PMO or vice versa. Not at all. They are two legs of the same struggle, the same strength. We are equally strong against terrorism. We're equally strongly in favor of the Palestinians, and we will work for both these causes. There is absolutely no conflict. Do not create a conflict where none exists.
All right. I'll come back to you for concluding comments to both of you, Professor Pasha and Ambassador Sikri. But before that, Sanjay, when Ukraine war was on, during that time, India, had a very nuanced approach towards making statements on Ukraine and also balancing things with Russia. But why couldn't India do this balancing act at the initial stage, whether it was Prime Minister's post or whether it was MEA's much delayed statement, which came after 6 days? Why do you think that India was not able to do that diplomatic balancing act right in the beginning? Yes.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to listen to Ambassador Sikri and Professor Pasha. This is a very complicated issue. I mean, the fact of the matter is, as one of our panelists pointed out, there are two legs to the entire thing. One was how to react to the act of terror, which India did adequately in terms of reaching out. As Professor Pasha pointed out, Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, go back long years. They are friends and they have been with each other. They are in conversation all the time. So I think it was a burden that the PM had to share in a certain way by saying that, the act of terror was bad and, he criticized it. Subsequently, there is a certain kind of realization that followed that, there is a foreign policy obligation that has to be met, which was met out in a certain way by reiterating India's commitment to support Palestine. But now problems begin only now. How will India react to Israel's demand that 1 million people should leave Gaza Strip in the matter of 24 hours? Because it's all right to say that Hamas and Palestine are two different things. They are actually, but the fact of the matter is that Israel is not taking cognizance of Hamas and Israel and Palestine as two separate entities. Is bashing up Gaza in the same manner as if they all belonging to the same terror organization. And Hamas is a terror organization, and many people say, and there is records to show that at some stage the Israeli intelligence service had some role to play in building it up. So I think it's a far more complicated, and the worst thing is that it's spilling over to other countries. When you have a situation where Iran and Saudi Arabia having a conversation about how to deal with Palestine, then you have the Israeli Air Force bombing Syria and preventing the Iranian foreign minister to land there, and you have many other related issues. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you find that there is great amount of turmoil which is there in the entire Islamic world. You have Jordanians actually trying to get into Israel. You have other people trying to assert themselves. Same thing is happening in Egypt. So this kind of ferment, it can't be just limited to Hamas. Hamas wanted this kind of thing to happen. They wanted to go beyond their own terror act into weaving in other Arab countries or other Islamic countries. They have succeeded primarily because Israel doesn't see Hamas as a Palestinian entity, but it sees it as a Palestinian, not a terror organization.
Professor Pasha, if you could switch on your camera in the meanwhile, and I'll have one more question for Sanjay. Sanjay, do you think that MEA has been able to do the damage control in a manner in which it should have done? And of course, there was huge cost. People were saying that, there is at stake was this Middle East economic corridor. Then there were a lot of Muslims who are staying across the world, they would have an impact. I mean, despite all the electoral compulsions which Prime Minister allegedly would be having in his mind, but there was a certain damage which was done by this statement. So has the damage control been done perfectly now by the MEA? Today, we also saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking at the P20 summit. He was talking about conflicts, humanitarian crisis, and all of that. So is he trying to do some kind of a cover-up exercise as far as PM Modi is concerned?
I think the Prime Minister had to say what he said. It's not that he didn't say that. And what MEA said had to be said. in a same way. But challenges don't end thereafter. Then your political position starts asserting itself. Now, what will be seen is whether the PM is able to do the balancing. He has done that in this P20 conference by stating it's not the era of war, and people need to get together and work. But it's easier said than done. In fact, in my reckoning, he should have taken the initiative and said that there should be ceasefire. The fight should end, and India should have offered its good offices to have some kind of dialogue or something to restore peace and to ensure that the humanitarian aid should reach. Now, the issue of humanitarian aid has become very contentious. Israel doesn't want any kind of aid to reach the people who are living in Gaza Strip, and they are not a small number. It is about 2.4 million people who stay there. And without power, without water, without food, you can just imagine the kind of havoc it can create in the coming days. So we have to somehow find a position which we can articulate, which strengthens our role as a leader of the G20 movement, like we did, or the Prime Minister stepping up his act. So these are challenges which I think are going to come up in the coming days.
How India has tried to reiterate its position on the Palestine-Israel conflict. But yes, Sanjay, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it does look like a dramatic shift in just a matter of 6 days, what we have seen happening on Israel-Palestine conflict.
I mean, you call it whatever. I mean, it's this possible that you will hang on to your position. It is a dramatic shift. But the truth is that the Prime Minister and the MEA managed to turn back. They took cognizance of India's history, India's past, India's politics, India's compulsions. Because as Professor Pasha said, there are many countries in the OIC, about 56 countries. You can't antagonize them. There is only one country, Israel, and you can't be just putting all your eggs in that basket. And Israel does nothing. They don't even produce oil. They don't produce anything. They only export a certain kind of technology which is useful for India, and that's pertaining to war. I mean, surveillance technology, do satellites and stuff like that. So India had to take along everybody. So there was one statement for Mr. Netanyahu, but a larger statement coming out from MEA to assuage any kind of feeling amongst the Arabs, who have become very sensitive ever since this government has come. I want to remind you of what really happened when Nupur Sharma made the statement against Prophet Saab. And there was outrage all around, and there was something had to be done. Although the government managed to, get out of that situation. But yeah, it can be very tricky. And in the coming days, I think there will be more challenges which will be facing MEA and the government.
Absolutely. So, Sanjay, it wouldn't be wrong if people were criticizing Prime Minister's initial posts on Israel-Palestine conflict, saying that it was one-sided, it was ill thought out, it was lopsided, the kind of post which was put out at that point of time. And even if he made that post emotionally because of his personal relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, given the diplomatic relations, he shouldn't have done it.
I don't know. What really happened, that people were taken aback by the terror strike that happened. I mean, even the Israelis, for that matter, nobody expected their so-called formidable security to be breached.
Right.
They had everything going. They had satellites. They had, they had barrier. They had possibly the best intelligence network in the world. The Gaza Strip had been totally wired. I mean, there's so much of surveillance equipment which was there. It was supposed to be showcasing whatever Israel can do best. And many people were actually brought in to show that they are able to manage about 2.4 million people. In fact, in the earlier strike at Gaza, Israelis were able to pinpoint individuals who would be staying in the building, and they would tell them, get out of the building, we're going to bomb it. They knock on the building, as they call it. That was happening. So when that kind of thing happened, that they breached through that and they managed to destroy so many targets, kill so many people, it was with disbelief everybody was looking. Like suddenly there was so much respect and awe for Israel, and it had collapsed in front of your eyes. And it happened to the Prime Minister's good friend, who I'm sure was deeply embarrassed by whatever is happening. His politics may be screwed, but the fact of the matter is that they're thick in many ways. So, absolutely. I mean, there is a reason at that point of time you could have held a position, but I think there's been a certain rethink. There is more nuanced approach which is followed by MEA.
Absolutely. So, what would you really say in the end? Of course, there is a grave humanitarian crisis evolving as far as Palestine and Israel issue is concerned right now. But are there learning lessons for India in the manner in which PM posted out and the MEA reaction coming after 6 days? What would you say as a concluding
Yeah,
remark?
I would like to believe that what the Prime Minister said is an oversight, but I think he also has been briefed sufficiently, and the MEA is on the job. How we can coordinate with, say, our friends, strategic partners like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar and other countries to elevate the humanitarian issue.
All
And
right.
also work with our partners in the European Union and the United States. This is a catastrophe if hundreds and thousands are being massacred by a state violating international law, humanitarian law, Geneva Convention. We cannot be partners in arms with the United States and with the EU, the so-called upholders of the international order. Just one line I would like to add.
Yes, sir.
The Prime Minister would, I think, would not comment in future. The MEA would be left to do the work which is necessary as the war escalates. God forbid, if Syria or Lebanon,
All right.
Hezbollah join, it will be a
Yes.
disaster for the region and for our interest also.
Right. So I hope there are some learning lessons for the Prime Minister's approach as well as MEA. If MEA did not brief the Prime Minister enough. But yes, the damage control has been done for now, and all eyes would be on how this humanitarian crisis, which is unfolding as far as Palestine and Israel is concerned, how can that be mitigated? Thank you so much, Sanjay Kapoor, Professor Pasha. It was wonderful to have you on the program. And one appeal to the viewers who are watching this discussion, subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to The Federal. Thank you.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.